Everybody loves clowns, right? The good old jolly jesters of the circus have been entertaining audiences around the world for centuries using their playful nature, bright colours and slapstick stunts. It appears innocent in tone and the viewing audience take it with good humour without letting anything get to them.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
Turns out that around 12% of the general population are actually scared of clowns, and smaller percentages have a full-blown phobia of them. It's a fairly new phenomenon called coulrophobia, and psychologists haven't quite been able to explain it. I guess the whole idea of a phobia is that the fear is supposed to be irrational. Well, I'm hardly qualified to get to the bottom of it, but I'm briefly going to give it a try. Let's start off with the most obvious, the look. Now, a clown's makeup is not so heavy that it completely covers the face. It's still somewhat recognisable as a human being, but it creates a distorted perception of the presentation, which seems to disturb some people. It's clear enough to be seen as a person, but warped enough for them to know that something's off. The permanent smile, regardless of the performer's emotions or expression, can also create a form of deceit and manipulation. On top of that, it could be anybody underneath there. This falls into the classic killer trope of a monster hiding in plain sight, only in the movies, with the absence of makeup, it's most commonly a monster hiding beneath the human image, as opposed to that of a clown, where a human hides behind a grotesque face paint. It's not only the face that's deemed creepy with a clown's image either. Hands, feet, clothing, they're all exaggerated to create a look that should be seen as comical but all too often comes across as frightening. But this is a movie channel, right? Why am I wasting so much time talking about clowns? Well, first of all, clowns, jesters, fools, whatever you want to call them, are one of the oldest traditional forms of entertainment in history, trailing all the way back to medieval times. It would only make sense that over the centuries the clown has influenced a great number of fictional characters, especially the ones that have a sinister darkness lurking inside of them. But they were made for entertainment, to make kings and queens, audiences alike, all laugh. So what's the big deal? Well, I have a theory, but you're going to have to stick with me because it might seem a little bit complicated at first. But in the world of movies, I'm going to throw something out there that I like to call the clown effect. What is the clown effect? Well, it's the belief that movie villains are often made scary by exaggerating attributes that are commonly linked with the history of a clown. Now, this doesn't mean that the villain themselves have to necessarily look like a clown, but you can still pull minor details from history. For example, if a fool was not entertaining his ruler properly, he would be mutilated to wear a permanent smile. A constant grin's unsettling to some viewers because of how unnatural it is, especially when the eyes tell a different story in contrast to the grimace. Take Jack Nicholson's Joker and his victims from Batman, or even Bob from Twin Peaks. It's practically impossible to talk about a clown-like villain without mentioning cult status characters like Pennywise from the adaptation of Stephen King's It. Or how about the Kyoto brothers' killer clowns from outer space, or even human clowns such as Captain Spaulding or Twisty the Clown in more recent memory. The playful innocence of these characters is able to lure people into a false sense of security before they strike, murdering adults and kids alike. They use goofy props with a murderous twist, over-enthusiastically display their threat when in the presence of those afraid of clowns, but they're able to play on the innocence of fun when in the presence of those who trust in them. But these are actual clowns. What about these attributes being attached to a character that doesn't share any physical resemblance to clowns? Well, we could argue that a dangerous over-the-top weapon like an acid pie or popcorn gun would be a little bit corny and out of place if it were to appear anywhere other than a movie where the villain was a literal clown. But the examples I just mentioned are from movies that could be considered goofy or comedic in their own right. So, let's try to look at some of the more subtle details of a clown and their history, and how they affect the modern day villain. I'll try to break it down the best I can. Number 1. The depressed clown. The depressed clown is one of the more stereotypical concepts of our circus friends. I'd like to translate this idea over to a serial killer. You know the type, right? Across many movies since the beginning of time, we've had to deal with a killer who doesn't want to actually be a killer. They deal with an internal struggle but can't kick the addictive feeling of ending somebody's life. Where a depressed clown gets a rush by entertaining the audience at the expense of their own pride and dignity, the depressed killer feeds his need to kill at the expense of his own sanity. It creates a unique layer to the character, and in some cases it can make us feel sorry for them, or at least root for them to overcome this addiction and get the help that they need. These are all able hands at murder. Damn able hands. Though none of them wear a maniacal grin and define themselves as a clown by nature, They still all hide behind the image of a regular human being with a dark edge buried underneath that they wish to be rid of. But much like the clown's desire for the spotlight, they deal with their own pressured mentality for the rush of the kill and the end result that ultimately destroys them. Number 2. The happy clown. Not unlike Pennywise or the Joker, there are many villains out there that act like full-blown clowns without actually sharing the image. These are the villains that take a great deal of pleasure in the torture and the distress of others. Though with a clown, the humiliation and jokes are all fairly innocent, they're still met with laughter. Crank it up a notch and remove the makeup, and you have some of the most unsettling antagonists that exist in the world of cinema. These are people that are not content enough with just killing their victims. They want to take the chance to make it their own personal entertainment, to fully dominate another human being whether or not the victim decides to voluntarily kneel. With the depressed clown portion of the killers, you could at least attempt to tap into what little humanity they have left and try to plead or manipulate your way out of the situation, but with the happy clown, you're screwed as soon as you're unfortunate enough to be in their sights. Nothing's going to stop them. They don't care about you and they don't care about what happens to you as long as it makes them laugh. It doesn't seem to matter if the clown's depressed or happy. When it comes down to the act of killing, there's usually one thing that makes it even scarier for both. Number 3. Clowns are super talented masters of their craft. This is probably the biggest point of my theory. All of the aforementioned killers are experts at taking people's lives, and what makes it even scarier is when they know it. If you look at a typical circus clown, no matter how they act, there's no denying that these performers are masters to the most perfect degree in their talents, so much so that they're able to execute high-risk stunts and take other people's well-being into their own two hands, all while engaging in a second task of looking like a complete fool in the process. Anybody ever juggled? Ever tried juggling while riding a unicycle? As if that wasn't hard enough, the clown has to make it look as if he's about to fall off and practically let it happen in order to recover from it. Only a Grand Master would be able to pull it off in such a convincing manner. So how does that make a villain scarier? Well, there has to be a point where the actions of your aggressor come across as so silly and self-entertaining that you can only imagine that they know that they are going to win. It's not even a doubt in their head. They're allowing themselves to appear like they're letting their guard down in order to have some fun, but in all seriousness they could not be in any more control. They have you in the palm of their hands. It's not just that they're happy to do it, it's that they're too experienced to fail. And this doesn't only apply to humorous jocular activities either. The sheer certainty of your victory can manifest itself in so many ways that it can unsettle the viewer. Here's a great example. When Hannibal Lecter escaped from his carefully constructed prison cell, he takes the time to listen to Goldberg variations before finishing off the last guard. Even when he heads over to finish the job, he does it with such a calm demeanour. His walk of grace to skin the officer was a reflection of how perfectly executed his plan was. Nothing was going to get in the way of the execution, so he takes time to listen to the music, then peacefully continues. Now, if this scene had involved Hannibal crawling on the floor scuffling with the jail guard, then after it was over he had to sprint in a panic to the other guard to subdue him, it would have been nowhere near as creepy. The audience likes suspense. They like to see a villain in action, but more often than not, the ones that scare the audiences most of all are the ones who have the guarantee of success. It really makes you not want to see certain characters become a target because of how certain their demise would be. It's largely linked to intelligence and experience, both shared by the typical circus clown who can do whatever the hell he likes because that trick that he's there to perform is going to be pulled off successfully regardless of the external factors. I don't know about you, but if I ever had the unfortunate choice of having to deal with a human being that's going to murder me, I'd rather not have the one that makes it perfectly clear just how helpless and screwed I really am. Now, I know all the examples I mentioned aren't exactly what you would call a clown per se, but if you were to look at it from a distance and analyse the behaviours of a clown as opposed to just the image and compare them to the characteristics of some of the most terrifying villains out there, they really aren't all that different. In many cases, it's just an exaggerated element of a clown that's been turned on its side for the worst. In many cases, that's all that fear really is. Amplified elements of what we're already familiar with. That's how we can negatively relate to the horrors we see on screen without ever having experienced it firsthand. So, the next time you're watching one of your most intimidating on-screen personalities dominate the frontal portion of your temporal lobe, take a moment to think about what it is that makes them truly scary, because you never know, you might just be looking at a clown in disguise.